Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Speaking Moistly. With me today is Billboard Chris. I've teased this interview earlier today. So Chris is here. Thank you very much for joining me and persevering through sound issues.
My pleasure, Mark. Thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to talk to anyone who wants to spread the truth about what's happening to kids these days.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a long history of working with kids. I worked in children's mental health for 15 years. And so I learned about gender dysphoria. I learned, like, this was in the education curriculum when I was going through to do what I did. I was working as a youth care worker, blah, blah, blah. So I went to college for that. We had Psych 101. So I'm qualified. Not really. But, gender dysphoria was a thing. And it wasn't something that I thought would be, it would be encouraged. And then anybody having a discussion that is against this trans ideology, I guess, is that the best term for it, to kind of like all-encompassing term?
I think gender ideology.
Gender ideology. Yeah. Anybody who said anything against that is literally like spreading child pornography or something to that effect. Is that's kind of what the law says at this point in time, or am I misunderstanding that? C4.
So, well, C4 is about conversion therapy. This
Right.
bill that just passed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's now deemed conversion therapy to help a child feel comfortable in their skin. If a girl thinks she's a boy, or if a girl gets indoctrinated in school to think she's a boy just because she has more masculine stereotypes, that's okay. That's not considered conversion therapy.
Right.
But to help this girl then feel comfortable as a girl, that's considered conversion therapy.
Right.
Totally mental.
It is shocking. And like, I read through the bill on my show just because I'd been talking about it, and because everything that the liberals say they're going to do, it seems like they do the opposite. And they say, we're for inclusive, equal, blah, 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 blah. And they exclude the majority of people or vaccine-free people or whatever. So with regards to the C4, they were saying that they were protecting kids by not allowing this conversion therapy because it's damaging. But they say in it, like, you can support somebody who's transitioning, but if you tell somebody that they might be straight or cisgendered, then that's a no-go. And I couldn't believe how blatant the language was, and how the politicians were dancing around and super happy about this. It's chilling on a whole bunch of levels.
Right. So this bill has two components to it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's by design. So there is a ban on conversion therapy based on someone's sexual orientation, which everyone agrees with. We shouldn't try to change people's sexual orientation.
Sure.
Because who you love, who you're attracted to, is immutable, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
So we all agree we shouldn't try to convert gay and lesbian people.
Yep.
The other component of this bill is gender identity, which remains undefined.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can tell you what gender identity actually means. And if they do try, it always comes down to stereotypes.
Interesting. Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a minute. But sure. This bill is really designed to prevent children who are having distress about their gender from receiving help, mm-hmm. from receiving talk therapy.
Yep.
Because it's a one-way street, this bill. It's totally fine to indoctrinate a girl to think she's a boy, but then to have her feel comfortable in her skin, that's conversion therapy. And they purposely include sexual orientation and conflate it with gender identity, mm-hmm. because of course everyone's against converting someone's sexual orientation.
Right. And
that's kind of what they tend to focus on these bills, and they try to make it about that. But the real purpose for these bills is the gender identity component. And we have all these kids now being taught in school, social media, in the culture at large, that if a girl has more masculine tendencies, if she's a tomboy, if she wants to play in the dirt, play football and climb trees and be an engineer, this somehow means that she has a boy's gender identity. Instead of just telling these children that there's no right way to be a girl and there's no right way to be a boy.
Yeah.
And if you're gender nonconforming, beautiful. A lot of these kids historically with gender dysphoria grow up to be gay or lesbian. Mm-hmm. We know this from academic studies. But instead of telling these kids that there's no right way to be, that they can be whatever they want when they grow up. We're now teaching these kids that it is stereotypes that define their gender. So if you look at the genderbread person, which is this cutesy little image of a traditional gingerbread man, it teaches these kids that their gender identity is based on things like jobs, roles, expectations, hobbies, likes and dislikes.
Yep.
It's just all sexist regressive nonsense. And tomboys are not boys. Tomboys are girls. Effeminate boys are not girls. They are just effeminate boys. And they can present however they wish. They're still boys and they're still girls. And that's how it's always been. And it's how it's always going to be.
Yeah.
There has never been one person born in the history of mankind that is not male or female. But this ideology has been put into our schools by activists who are producing unscientific materials. They're indoctrinating children. And it's all of the most vulnerable kids who fall for this. It's all these kids with comorbidities like autism. Autism is, according to some of the gender clinic studies themselves, 40% of the kids that show up to these gender clinics have autism. Yeah. But it's super common. ADHD, abuse, trauma, sexual abuse is really common.
Well, it gives them a reason. Like, once I do this, I'm going to feel better. Right. And then these people all have a mission, these people who are surrounding this person to help them, right, feel better. And then they don't realize it comes with its own set of, its own baggage in and of itself. So if, I don't know if it's personal, we can just move on to the next question, but why do you do what you do?
Well, I first started doing what I do because I have girls. I have two girls. They're now 9 and 12 years old. They were 8 and 10 when I started this campaign. But I started becoming aware of all this stuff getting taught in schools and all these girls, mostly girls, who were falling for this ideology and then getting physically harmed by medical malpractice, which we'll get into. But I see this as a cult, essentially, that's kind of infiltrated society. It basically has all the hallmarks of a cult, except for maybe a cult leader. But going back in time, we can kind of nail down who the cult leaders were funding this.
To make it happen. Yeah. Well, I was going to say there's not really it's not a public leader, but you've got a whole bunch of different, you've got a powerful, middle manager. You've got a vice principal somewhere, somebody who's got some club in a school, and like they're a de facto leader. They'll whip up 100, 200 people and so on and so forth. Yeah. Interesting.
But I have girls and I understand how malleable a child's mind is. And so when we're not just teaching science in schools anymore, when we're actively teaching ideology, I wanted to learn all about this ideology. And the more I learned, the more I didn't like. Yeah. And in July of 2020, there's a woman in the UK named Posey Parker. And she put up a sign at the Edinburgh train station, which said, "I love J.K. Rowling. I heart J.K. Rowling." Because J.K., the Harry Potter author, has spoken out about this affecting kids. She's spoken out about how women's rights are under attack as well. And when Posey Parker put up that poster, it got taken down the next day because a few people on Twitter complained. And you get all these complainers on Twitter who, every time something happens that they don't like, they lose their minds and they freak out, and they cause newspapers to change their stories, to change their headlines, to drop their stories completely. And you get this woke mob coming for them. And I got tired of the censorship. So I put up a big billboard in Vancouver that said the same thing. And it got paint bombed overnight. And then a Vancouver city councilor said it was hate speech the next day.
Interesting.
It has a big heart on it, Mark.
Yeah.
But the sign company, Pattison Outdoor, Jimmy Pattison's company, they buckled to the pressure and they took it down. So then I did a whole bunch of billboards throughout the US. I leveraged all the outrage on Twitter and did some fundraising and did this campaign of billboards in the US. And then at the end of September 2020, before this whole thing started, I was all in. I had decided back in July of 2020 that I was going to make a long stand. And so I had these signs printed up because they can't take a sign off my back. And I literally wear signs like a sandwich board because it's the only way to get the message through to the broad public is to go outside. And they can't take a sign off my back because I'm not breaking any laws. And so the signs I wear on my front, it usually says children cannot consent to puberty blockers, which are these drugs that stop kids going into puberty, just like it sounds.
Yeah.
And on my back, it might say gender ideology does not belong in schools, or children never born in the wrong body. Or I have one sign that's the definition of a dad, which is a human male who protects his kids from gender ideology.
Yeah. So what's the kind of reaction that you get?
More than 90% positive.
Yeah. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. How do you think, who most needs to hear the message? Like, who do you think? Yeah. Parents? Is it moms, dads, moms and dads?
Moms and dads.
Yeah.
This ideology is now in our schools, and it's, of course, affecting the most vulnerable kids who've had tough lives. We have this one psychologist in BC named Wallace Wong, who says he's transitioning over 1,000 children, including 500 in the foster system. 500 foster kids. That's 10% of all the kids in state care in BC, approximately. And half of them are Indigenous.
Wow.
But this thing is totally out of control. So we need to reach parents, because parents are being blindsided, and their kids are coming home having been indoctrinated in school for a period of months or years. Parents have no idea this is going on. And we have this craze affecting mainly adolescent girls of what's called rapid onset gender dysphoria. It's not traditional gender dysphoria that starts really young with 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds, usually boys. It's hitting these girls when they get to adolescence, which is a tough time for girls. And if you give kids who are struggling an option to opt out of their sex, well, some are going to take you up on that.
Well, and if you also tell them that the whole problem here is you were accidentally born into the wrong body, but lucky you, we can fix that.
Right.
But they can't, though. There's no, like, and there have been, as you say, there've been lots of studies. I've seen anecdotally, so I can't cite studies, but I've seen people regretting those transitions. And these are things that can't be undone. You're saying children can't consent to puberty blockers. Children are protected from, the draft, being able to vote, all sorts of different contractual agreements they have to go through their parents, because they can't understand the long-term consequences of their choices. And these people, and the Hydra that we're talking about, are claiming that kids have the ability to say, well, actually, I am the other gender, and I'm gonna start damaging my body. I'm gonna start the transition process, and people are enabling this. And it's just, I mean, I don't know what it would take to get people to move on it. And if people move, I don't know if it would be impactful. Like, honestly, I've done, I've got you've heard of critical race theory, right?
Of course.
So critical race theory is alive and well in the Upper Grand District School Board. And they took offense when I said, well, hold on, I've worked in the Upper Grand District School Board. Everybody who works there is not racist. Like, the statements you're making are completely false and crazy. And then we dug into it more, and they said that any system built by white people is inherently racist because it was built by white people. And I was like, that is a racist statement. You can't say that. This was a board staff member saying to board trustees, and everybody just sat there and said, yeah, you're right. And I was aghast. I couldn't believe it. But that's the level of where we're at with the gender ideology. Like, people are numb to it almost. They don't know what to do, because if they do something, they'll be ignored or worse.
Yeah. So we have to set proper expectations when we are doing activism or advocating for sanity on this issue. And the proper expectations are that all we can impact is the person who we are talking to. The government is not going to listen. The school boards are not going to listen. So we honestly need to forget about trying to change those policies and change laws from top down. This is down to parents protecting their individual kids by having conversations with their kids about the truth. And so parents don't know this stuff is going on in schools for the most part. So every time we have a conversation with a parent, they are almost unanimously horrified by what's happening. They have no idea what their kids are getting taught. So we just have to bypass the government and all these other institutions, take this straight to parents so they can protect their kids. And we'll never hear about the good that's coming from this, because these are kids that would have been indoctrinated that now won't get indoctrinated. And so every conversation you have is a win.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. Letting people in on what's going on is 50% of the battle at very least. And getting people talking about it, because I feel like if they're approaching you and you've got your sandwich board on, they know they're, it's not Christmas dinner. Like, this is the time for truth bombs, if there's any time for truth bombs. So they're approaching you, they're self-selecting, they know they're in for a conversation, right? So is there like a memorable, awesome conversation that you had where an indoctrinated teacher was like, oh my God, you're right? Like, anything like that?
So, well, I've had more than 5,000 of these. So I have
Awesome.
had lots of memorable conversations. But with the people who are indoctrinated, you're not going to change a person's mind when they're heavily indoctrinated in a single conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm really not there to talk to the indoctrinated people. I'm really not outside to talk to the angry people. And I'm not trying to change anyone's mind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to talk to the normal people who still know that biological sex is a reality and are horrified that we are trying to change the sex of children.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't worry about the indoctrinated people. But when they do come along, if they're super angry, they never want to talk, ever. They just are swearing and yelling and abuse and flipping me off and storming away.
Yeah.
But if someone is semi-hostile, my strategy with them is to say something that they agree with, because none of these people actually know what my position is. They don't actually read my sign and compute what it means.
Right.
They see children cannot consent to puberty blockers, and they jump to a conclusion that I must hate trans people, which is the furthest thing from the truth. Yeah. People are people. I don't care how you identify. Mm-hmm. It's our job as a human being to love everyone and treat everyone with respect and kindness.
Right. Right.
So, but these people who are semi-hostile, I'll just say something like, first of all, I don't think we should ever put a kid in a stereotypical box. There's no right way to be a girl. There's no right way to be a boy. And if a girl's more masculine or a boy's more feminine, wonderful. Let them express themselves however they want.
Of course. Yeah.
And then I'll just stop. And they get so confused.
Checkmate.
So that's really the end of that conversation.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to change their mind, but I've created cognitive dissonance in their brain. Because now there's two competing ideas. They thought I was a bigot. Then I said something they agreed with. And they have to make sense of that somehow. So maybe they'll go home and they'll Google it and they'll start the process of deprogramming themselves very slowly over a number of years, which is probably how long it takes.
Yes.
But I'm out there to talk to the 93% of people who fully agree and aren't okay with sterilizing children.
Yeah, fair enough. So when have you give an example of that? Give an example of a situation where you really like opened somebody's eyes and it's kind of gone well, if that makes sense.
Oh, it happens 20 times a day. Someone just comes up and go, what are puberty blockers?
Really?
So all the time, it's constant. So I'll just say, well, it's a drug that we give to kids these days when they want to switch their sex. And it does exactly what the sign says it does. It stops their bodies going into puberty. It blocks the pituitary gland from releasing the hormones. I don't get into all that all the time.
Yeah.
But what it does is it stops the pituitary gland from releasing hormones, which trigger estrogen in girls and testosterone in boys.
Yeah.
And so, it just stops kids going into puberty, and everyone right away is horrified.
Yeah. So the thing for me is I guess that maybe my own bias is coming into play. I do the news every day, and I've experienced Antifa, and I've been watching, the riots and the violence that's been on the rise in the last few years. So when I see you go around, I know how brave that is. You know what I mean? I understand, especially in Vancouver, especially in that climate, or especially in BC in that climate. But you're all over the country, and you've been down to the United States. You tour with this, and you go to places specifically to address issues that have become hot button issues. So I understand that, but it's interesting to me that there are so many people who come up to you who don't even know the basics, because for me, you're a lightning rod, you know what I mean? And I think a brave lightning rod, something that needs to be done. And we need to have more conversations like what you're saying. But it's shocking to me that you have so many people come up that are at like zero knowledge on this, like they haven't noticed.
The majority are still at zero. Yeah. A year ago, almost everyone was at zero. Yeah. So I've seen a massive improvement. Yeah. But when I say a massive improvement, I'm talking like maybe 1 or 2% of the population now know. Yeah. Which is still huge, because when you're in a busy downtown area, you're getting encouragement all the time now.
Yeah.
I get
Well,
people
that's good.
shouting out their car encouragement. I get fist bumps constantly. When it's busy like it is this time of year downtown, Christmas
Yeah.
shopping, I'll be talking nonstop for 4 or 5 hours.
Wow.
Nonstop.
Wow.
People come up to me and then people are waiting to talk.
Do you
And
ever
then I
live
talk to
stream
them
it?
and
Do you like do a live
no,
stream or anything like that?
because here's the thing. So I wear a body cam now for a couple reasons. Number one is to protect myself because
Yeah.
I get assaulted, I take abuse. I like to expose the huge jerks out there because they need to be exposed. It's
Yeah.
educational for people to understand the zealotry that exists on this topic.
Yeah.
But if I have a nice conversation with someone and I get their approval, I'll post it. But I can't live stream this.
You can't live stream.
If someone agrees with me, they're going to lose their job.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, good point. Good point.
People that came out and stood with me in Ontario a month and a half ago, one of them's off work on stress leave because they doxed him, they doxed his wife. Everyone else was doxed. One guy thought he was going to lose his job.
Yeah.
Libelous fake news was written about us by antihate.ca, which is essentially an Antifa organization funded by the federal government.
Yeah.
They get a grant from the federal government.
Yeah.
And all these people get doxxed. So I tell people, you know, if it's okay, I'll post this conversation. And some of the nice conversations, they'll say yes. But I warn them. I say, look, if you're in a job and you're employed, and I tweet this out, you might get in serious heat.
Yeah.
And most people don't want that. So most of the good conversations I can't post. So I have to protect people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have them? Like, I would be interested. It would be almost interesting to just put up audio or like just put up anonymous version, just because
I've posted plenty of the good conversations.
Yeah.
Just on Twitter, they all get buried in the timeline. But
yeah, of course. Yeah.
There's tons of them up there. But maybe I'll retweet some just because newer followers haven't seen them.
Yeah. Do you have a website where you compile them? Maybe if there's a list of like, the good conversations, maybe if you could get that, because you've got a ton of, you're an expert in this conversation. Like, you've had this conversation. You said 5,000 times would be whatever, 4 hours on a Saturday afternoon is nothing, right? Like, you've had this conversation over and over again, people asking different versions of the same question, and you've got strategies for different types of people. So if you compiled, if you don't have a web space, I'll help you with that, or I'll put it up.
I have a website.
Okay, great. Yeah. But yeah, like, if you could, like,
I just don't update it because I don't have time, but my website is Billboard Chris. My website's billboardchris.com. And I will be updating it with a bunch of podcasts and news items and all that sort of stuff. But it's got all the basics for people to learn about puberty blockers and that sort of thing.
Cool. Well, that's good to know, and check it out. The description, the link will be in the description as well.
All right.
But yeah, it's one of those things. I always thought that the internet was a powerful thing for that reason, to get like the best conversation, or like the best physics lesson. Like, why do this again? If this is like nailing it, like, why do this again? And if you've got that much experience having that conversation with people, if you've got that much experience with, like, not convincing people, because that's not your job. It's their job to come to their own conclusions based on the facts. But the fact is, most people, the facts are hidden, right? They're hidden away through Twitter feeds and Facebook censorship and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And the media won't report in Canada. The media won't report
the
truth. They present this as a child finding their authentic self.
Yeah. Well, and that's the same perversion across the media that we've seen with regards to COVID-19 and climate change, right? Like, we've seen basically if something, it doesn't really matter what happens with COVID-19. Whatever the politicians want to have happen happens anyway, right? And like, the media spin it like, oh, more cases, more this, more that. It seems less and less honest the longer this goes on, the media. And so, yeah, it's difficult to have conversations about what's really going on in Canada with people who get their news from CTV, CBC, those kind of sources, without any more kind of color to what's going on. I'm appalled at what the legislature is doing. Just everything they pass is inverted, and C4 is a good example. But everything, they're going to go after more speech on the internet with C10. Have you heard?
Yeah.
Have you been paying attention to that?
Oh yeah. I follow all this stuff.
Yeah. I don't know that your strategy of wearing a billboard is is good just to get the news out there. How do you decide where to tour through? Is it just news items and stuff?
No, I just go to wherever people are.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So I go to busy intersections. I go downtown where there's lots of people. I tend to hang out by the train station there where people are coming in. But if there's a protest going on or some event going on, like a freedom rally or whatever, I go to that. I've been invited to speak at them. I sometimes go outside universities because universities are where this whole ideology has hit a fever pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And we are supposed to be able to talk about ideas at a university.
Yeah.
But they have become 99% liberal, increasingly woke, and anything that resembles conservative speech, you'll induce a riot if you go to speak about it.
Yeah.
So I'll go hang out outside a university on the public land. Sometimes I'll start on the university land until I get kicked off.
Yeah.
But then a bunch of people see me and then they come find me on the public land. So it's a good strategy.
Yeah.
But I filmed the whole thing. These kids have been lied to. So the key thing about this, we're so divisive as a society.
Yeah.
The left are a bunch of idiots. The right are a bunch of idiots. We all hate each other. We all think, the right think the left are a bunch of libtards, and the left think the right are a bunch of meanies, and they're the loving ones. And all the media and all the political parties stoke this division.
Mm-hmm.
But we're all human beings at the end of the day. We should be able to have a conversation. And the people who have fallen for this ideology are not bad people.
No.
Maybe some of them. But 99% of them just think they're doing the right thing. Yeah. And they've been lied to. Yeah. So they need to have an honest conversation with someone who can stay calm and be respectful. They can't usually.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's okay. If you're calm and you're reasonable and you're peaceful, you are busting the idea that they have that this is about bigotry. And so they rethink the people who are speaking up against gender ideology when you're calm and peaceful.
Yeah. But like you said, so I ran for the People's Party in 2019. And they being the press implied heavily that I was a racist because I ran for the PPC, but I mean, of course I'm not a racist. But regardless, it doesn't matter. The smears are what matters, right? Like the press is constantly lying. The press is constantly trying to tie, as you were saying, well, at university, when I was running for that during that election cycle, the university canceled an event because they tried to run it and uninvite me. And I said, that's against the law. You can't do that. And so rather than run the event and invite me, they canceled the event and blamed me for it. And they tried to imply that I threatened them on the phone, and I record all my conversations. So it is absolutely, like when you say, some of them are bad people, maybe they're all victims though, right? Like they're all victims of a machine that is pushing not just gender ideology, but critical race theory, and then telling people that they've got the moral high ground, that what they're saying is morally correct, morally right, the only possible way we could solve the problem. And I just see echoes of that same argument in climate change, echoes of that same argument in the lockdowns, in the vax passports, in the all of it. It just seems like the same lie used over and over, and it works every freaking time, and it's so frustrating.
It's the same basic psychology at play for everything.
Yeah.
And every cult, it's the same in every cult. The victims become the perpetrators.
Yeah.
They become the true believers, but they've been victimized in the first place.
Yep.
But they become the true believers. You get these university graduates getting into HR, getting into teaching. Most teachers are young females. Young females are the ones who are particularly falling for this ideology.
Yep.
About 90% of the verbal abuse I get comes from young women.
Really? That's interesting.
I never worry about a big, strong guy walking down the street because I've never had a problem with any of them.
Interesting.
But it's playing on women's compassion, and it's a lot of girls who are being transitioned. So these young women want to be supportive of all these girls that they know, and they just think I'm the devil for daring to speak about what is a medical malpractice going on.
Yeah.
But they don't know that because they've never heard it and they've been lied to. And they all
Yes.
believe that if you don't let kids transition, the kids will kill themselves. They
Mhm.
believe there's like a 41% suicide rate. They've all been led to believe that puberty blockers are just a pause button and are fully reversible. It's not true.
Interesting. No, of
You
course not.
can't you can't reverse time.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no
No,
time machine.
it doesn't work
If
like
you
that.
if you go on puberty blockers from 11 to 16, you're not going back to 11 to go through puberty again.
Yeah.
That window's gone.
Yeah.
And honestly, they believe that there's such a thing as a girl brain or a boy brain, and that some kids are born in the wrong body. But when I ask them to define what that means, I always ask them to define.
Yeah.
I try to use like the Socratic method of debate by asking questions to get them thinking. There's no
Yeah.
point trying to tell people stuff.
No,
Don't
no.
tell anyone. Just ask them questions to get them thinking. What does it mean to be a boy? What does it mean to be born in the wrong body? What is gender identity?
Yeah.
They can't define any of it.
Yeah. Well, because it's nonsense. Like,
That's right.
yeah, it's nonsense. And right, like the thing is, when you're a kid, it's hard to be a kid because other people have a lot of say over what you can do with your time and with your life. Like, go here because you have to go to school. Mom and dad have to go to work. You have to pay attention. You have to go to the neighbors after school, whatever it is. A lot of other people have control of your life. So when somebody says to you, only you've got control of this and what you say goes, that's a lot of power. That's intoxicating, right? And then that's even more jacked up during the early teen years. And again, kids at that age want to fight with their parents. That's like hardwired in. So they're using that outlet as like to hijack it, to take that ideology even further. It seems like it's a sick thing that we're watching. And they've got such a good system in place that, I mean, I think you're right. The only way to really meaningfully move the needle is to really talk with people and have them think it through. But most people don't even know.
But here's the thing. We have truth on our side.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter if the media won't report this or the governments are pushing it. This is such a basic, fundamental truth that we are male and female, and you can't change your sex. And it is so utterly ridiculous that having truth on our side and being willing to have conversations, which the other side is not, because as soon as they have a conversation, the whole ideology falls to pieces.
Yes.
But this will, through word of mouth, purely through word of mouth, it will spread across the country. The more parents learn, the more they talk to other parents. And we will get to a certain point where the percentage is 2 or 3% of the population who understand what's going on. And that's enough, because it's already unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of people who are learning what's going on increases every day. It's an unstoppable force. It's simply a matter of time before the outrage from parents and everyone else who understands biological reality. It's simply a matter of time until the outrage about what's happening to kids is so great that we start to move the needle politically as well. Because politicians are at their core somewhat cowardly, and the thing they fear the most is not getting reelected. Yeah. And right now, they don't deem it prosperous for them to speak the truth, but eventually they will. And what they don't realize right now is that they have 90% of the population on their side. If only they would learn how to message properly. They don't understand how to communicate what's going on because they're not educated enough.
Well, I agree. And I mean, most of our finance minister is a former journalist, right? She wrote the autobiography for George Soros, and she's the finance minister to the drama teacher prime minister, totally unqualified, right? Yeah. And the public officer of health, or the minister of health, was Patty Haydu until recently. Now it's not Yves Clue. No, I can't remember what his name is. But regardless of all that, yet none of the elected officials. The mayor of Guelph is a former insurance salesman, and fine, insurance salesman, but you're not well versed in macroeconomics or the impact of shutting down the economy to save people from COVID, or gender ideology. Even if the mayor was well versed in one of those things, he's not well versed in gender ideology, and he's sitting around allowing school boards to shoehorn this crap in. And I mean, It's not necessarily his fault. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying there are a lot of powerful people sitting around who aren't.
It's their fault.
Speaking out.
It's their fault. They're cowards. They have people. All these politicians have people telling them every day the truth. there's an organization called ARPA Canada, ARPA Canada. They sent over 4,000 emails to the senators the day before they voted on C4.
Yeah.
Right before they unanimously voted to approve C4 and fast track it through second and third reading without debate, without sending it to committee for hearings, immediately before the leader of the opposition in the Senate, a conservative, proposed that they just fast track it. The speaker right before him said that it should go to committee. And then 1 minute later, they voted unanimously not to go to committee.
Interesting.
Cowards.
Yeah. Well, right. And
the entire conservative caucus has been briefed on this.
Yeah.
I've talked to conservative members. They know they're just cowards.
Well, and I mean, I emailed the city of Guelph blocked me on Twitter, and it's a whole thing. But I emailed the management who's in charge of that, and then I emailed the one on top, like the manager of these managers, and I had a list of questions. Their modus operandi is to ignore me, and it's like, that's true across the whole board, right? Like provincial, federal, these people will just get an email and be like, all right, ignore it, done. And yeah, I think that you're right, but I can see how somebody in like a mayor's position would say it's not up to me to speak out against this. But I feel like I can see where you can get that. I could see where you could walk yourself there. You know what I mean? I can see where you could convince yourself that it's not your responsibility. But I don't see how I would be able to be silent about it. I would be so loud about it. People would tell me to stop talking, and I would say, I don't give a shit. Leave if you don't like it. I'm going to keep talking about it because it's wrong. And I just don't understand the disconnect. Like, are politicians really that craven? I don't.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so unfortunate, right? Man.
Mark, this is the biggest child abuse medical scandal.
Yes, I agree with you.
By far.
Yes.
In modern medicine history.
Yes.
I'm not going to go back through all of mankind because humans are crazy.
Well,
but we're talking about the psychology. So are you familiar with the picture? I'm going to look it up real quick.
Sure.
Maybe I'll hold it up to my screen.
Yeah.
There was, during World War II, there was this one German in a crowd of Nazis.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to find his name. And he refused to do the Nazi salute.
Yeah. I can picture the
August Landmesser is his name. And so there's hundreds of Nazis in the crowd. They're all doing the Nazi salute. And this one man is standing there like this.
Yeah.
This is human psychology in a nutshell. People go along with what is perceived or what is allowed during whatever day and age. And even though they know deep down that what's going on is wrong, mass psychosis kicks in, group psychology kicks in, and they just go along. And it's a very rare person who can be an August Landmesser, who, in spite of whatever, can stand up and just do what's right.
Yeah.
So, the more people who speak out against this, the safer it becomes for everyone else to speak out against it. So people watching this, one of the keys is people need to get informed, because if they're not informed, they don't know how to intelligently discuss the issue and obviously still sound compassionate, because we need to have compassion for all these kids. We need to have compassion for transgender adults.
Of course.
We're all people. But it's hard to have these conversations because it requires a bit of understanding. It's honestly not as complicated as it seems. We are male, we are female, and guess what? We should not sterilize kids with puberty blockers and the opposite sex's hormones.
Yeah.
So let's just talk really quickly, if you allow me 2 minutes.
Yeah, man.
I'm just going to talk about what's happening medically with these kids.
Sure.
As soon as they go to a gender clinic, or in the States, they can just walk into a Planned Parenthood and they'll get prescribed hormones immediately.
Wow. Like that day? Same day?
Right away.
Wow.
Yes. 20 minutes. You're in and out. These kids that are going to these gender clinics, they all have some comorbidity going on. Like I said, depression, anxiety, abuse, trauma, sexual abuse, ADHD, autism. More than half the time, there is no mental health assessment done on these children. They get these drugs right away. They are not told the ill effects that will happen to them. The president-elect of the World Professional Association for Transgender Health has admitted a lot of these kids, when they grow up, will never be able to have an orgasm. It's chemically castrating these children. They are chopping off the breasts of minors. Minors are getting their breasts chopped off without parental approval. Kids are going on these drugs and hormones without parental approval because different jurisdictions will treat them as mature minors and parental approval is not needed. It is sterilizing these kids. After 5 or 6 years on testosterone, these girls are having to get their uterus removed because it destroys their uterus. They're having to get their ovaries removed. They then either have to stay on testosterone for life, or because their bodies aren't producing estrogen anymore, if they decide to detransition, they have to get external sources of estrogen for the rest of their life. They'll never be able to bear children. They can't hold down relationships. And in many cases, it makes their dysphoria worse. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, we are not allowed to talk about this.
It boggles the mind, doesn't it? And yeah, it's incredible that there are people that think this is a positive step forward, because we should be able to articulate the truth. We should be able to speak the truth to people. We should be able to say, this is the like the brass tacks. When you strip everything else away, this is what you have to live with, right?
Yeah.
It's not spinning a story or anything like that. It seems, no. And you can find examples of people who are saying, I lived through this and I regret it. I lived through this and I wish that I had made a different choice. I saw 2 stories yesterday, and as I was preparing for the interview to talk with you, just kind of, I guess I noticed them more because they popped up, but I was like, man, like, yeah, this is something that's happening more and more. And our government is moving to make it so that it is impossible to talk with a person who's confused or anything like that. And further than that, just before I got on to the call with you today, I got an email from somebody who's struggling with exactly this thing. And he said, I'm hoping that me could get his story out. And I thought, wow, like incredible. I mentioned that you and I were chatting today, so that's probably why, but still, like,
okay,
this kind of stuff is, it's so rampant and it's so sad. So I'm really happy that you were able to come and make the time to come on the show today. And maybe we can get together again in 6 months and talk about how awful things are again.
For sure.
Hopefully things are getting better.
And if I may just make one quick plea to your viewers,
absolutely.
If they want to support what I'm doing, I've essentially quit my business. I'm traveling across the United States. I'm still traveling Canada. So if you want to support me, I can certainly use it. And there's a donate button on my website, billboardchris.com. But ultimately what I ask is that everyone just gets up to speed and has conversations with their neighbors, with their coworkers, with their loved ones, because that's how we're going to end this. It's down to us because our government has failed us completely. Yeah. So it's going to be down to the people to spread word.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And the link for Chris's website, billboardchris.com. Yeah. Will be in the description, and check it out and get informed. Don't be afraid to engage. And my goodness, the good you can do, conversations, they matter, right? That's why I do this. That's why I try and speak to people who have the experience that Chris has got, and share that with my audience, share that with you guys. So thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Chris, hang out in the green room after I say goodbye, and we'll see you all next time.